Well, the demonstration today of the presentation that you would do is about the Emmaus encounter. So the Emmaus encounter, of course, you will know, it's that moment when the two disciples were leaving the city of Jerusalem disheartened because Jesus had died. And some women had said that he had risen, but, they obviously weren't believing the women. So we have the diorama in front of us here. There is the Emmaus encounter and the moment when they go to stay in Emmaus. And off at the side, for brief reference, are the apostles in the upper room, in the cenacle. And they will come into the story towards the end. Now, as usual, you've got the little box there with the doctrine or the core points. And in this case, it's taken from the Catechism of the Catholic Church. And I'll read you what it says as an example. The doctrine or point here is that Jesus himself explained the meaning of his life and death in the light of God's suffering servant. After his resurrection, he gave this interpretation of the scriptures to the disciples at Emmaus and then to the apostles. That's taken from Catechism of the Catholic Church, number 601. So you are on good, solid ground when you are aware of that point or those points that are mentioned in the little box there for teacher reference. As I explained before, we have materials here that are for the road to Emmaus and Emmaus itself. And off at the side here, it's a good idea to put, if one can, the cenacle, the room of the cenacle with the apostles present, taken from the Last Supper. Of course, not including Jesus holding the host and not including Judas. So there's only 11 disciples at this point in time. 11 disciples who are apostles. The precise ones called by Jesus are called the apostles. And there are many more disciples and followers of Jesus. And the ones that are on their way out of Jerusalem are disciples. They're not one of the 12 or 11 now. They are two of the faithful followers of Jesus, and that is what a disciple is. An apostle, by the way, is one who is sent out to represent Christ. The apostles of Christ are on a mission from him. Today we're going to hear about something that happened on the very first day that Jesus rose from the dead, after he had appeared to the women. We can discover as well, if we look carefully and think carefully, how this event relates very much to something that happens in the Mass. I want to light the candle. This is taken from the Gospel of Luke. Two disciples were going to a village called Emmaus. It was about 7 miles from Jerusalem, and they were talking about what had happened. While they were talking, Jesus himself drew near and walked with them. But their eyes were kept from recognizing him. He said to them, "What are you discussing with each other as you walk along?" And they stood still and looked sad. Then one of them, whose name was Cleopas, answered him, "Are you the only stranger in Jerusalem who does not know what has taken place there on these days?" And he asked, What things? They replied, the things about Jesus of Nazareth, who was a prophet, mighty in deed and word before God and all the people, and how our chief priests and leaders handed him over to be condemned to death and crucified him. We had hoped that he was the one to redeem Israel. Yes, and besides all this, it's now 3 days since these things took place. And moreover, some women of our group astounded us. They were at the tomb early this morning. When they did not find his body there, they came back and told us that they had indeed seen a vision of angels who said he was alive. Some of those who were with us went to the tomb and found it was just as the women said, but they did not see him. Then Jesus said to them, how foolish you are, and how slow to believe in all that the prophets have declared. Was it not necessary that the Messiah should suffer these things and then enter into his glory? Then beginning with Moses and all the prophets, he interpreted for them the things about himself in all the scriptures. As they neared the village to which they were going, he walked ahead as if he were going on. But they urged him strongly, saying, stay with us, it's almost evening and the day is now nearly over. So he went in and stayed with them. When he was at table with them, he took bread and broke it and gave it to them. And then their eyes were opened and they recognized him, and he vanished from their sight. They said to each other, were not our hearts burning within us while he was talking to us on the road, while he opened up the scriptures to us? And they got up immediately and returned to Jerusalem, and they found the 11 and their companions gathered together. And the 11 said to them, the Lord has risen indeed, and he has appeared to Simon. Then they told them what had happened on the road and how they recognized him in the breaking of the bread. I wonder why the 2 disciples left Jerusalem and didn't believe the women. That's something to think about. I wonder why it was that they didn't recognize Jesus up front first off, and why their hearts were burning as Jesus spoke to them on the road. I wonder what they meant when what the Bible means and Scripture means was they recognized him at that particular moment. What made them recognize Jesus? And finally, we can think about how this story can help us today. Then, so as I say, the I Wonder questions, it's not that you'll present all of them. I'm presenting them just one after the other like this, but of course you would have pauses going on while the children are making some response. Expect a lot and expect not so much. It'll come both ways. They'll come up with amazing insights sometimes, and other times they may be a bit dry, and we have to ask ourselves, have I asked the questions in the right way? Have I said them in such a way that engages the children? The other thing I want to mention is this. I was reading literally from the Bible. It's written in the booklet, and sometimes it's slightly summarized, but it's removing words that are going to, take the children off on tracks that is too much to cope with. But the words are exactly as they are in the Bible. So it's worth considering how we read the Bible to them. When we read it with expression, not as just we're reading a text from the Bible, but we're reading a text that is really full of life and beauty and says so much, we have to read it with expression. Not over-expression. Maybe I over-express, I don't know. I'll be watching myself on this video to find out. But basically, with expression, to give the full meaning to the words that we can give in the time that we have. And not to rush it. Know how to pause when we're reading the gospel or the words of Scripture so that the points can penetrate. Because sometimes there are big sentences that are said there, and it's worth an extra bit of a pause as we're reading out loud to the children. As usual, there will be a number of choices using the diorama to retell the story, using their student journals or workbooks, engaging in craft activity, and reading the account in a children's book. You will notice that quite often a similar list is provided, not always, but many times. And I would call these activities generic activities, because you can apply these ideas and this discovery and pondering while they're doing some simple work or writing, that it can apply to any particular topic you've presented to them, whether it's from the gospel or whether it's something more liturgical and sacramental. So I call them generic activities, and there is a booklet called, and a PowerPoint to match it, I think, available for you, called the generic activities.